Welcome back. We're out in the greenhouse doing a little prep work. My son got himself awful dirty, but he's got himself some bread that he was making up. He's gonna throw in the oven over here. This oven has been one of the best investments for the little greenhouse here. Super simple to use. So welcome back. My son wanted to start the video by sharing his little bread making venture. He's very proud of himself for that. So today we're going to be setting up these tunnels, and by doing the tunnels we're going to be lowering the ceiling of the greenhouse. Now we utilize any free or cheap resource for heating we can in winter, and we always have multiple systems running for us, and like these systems were running before I even came out here this morning. So having all of those autonomous heating systems, which we're going to collect data from and kind of talk about today, but today is mainly focused on the tunnels. So pairing those with putting tunnels up and basically insulating and making a greenhouse inside a greenhouse. Now it's going to be about 40-some foot long. We're going to try and connect two tunnels together at the break point in the middle like we do every winter. So we have gotten a little bit more advanced with some of our heating systems, so I'm confident we should have good success this winter. Now if that sounds interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed. I am going to shed this sweatshirt because my son started this fire before I got out here, and we've got our compost heater blowing on me here. It's like 90 degrees down on this side of the greenhouse, and the sun is shining. It does not have very much potency with the clouds and stuff, and it feels good. It's nice to be out in the greenhouse, but it is warm in here. So the two systems behind me are definitely warm enough to keep this thing sustained through the winter. But running a stove all the time isn't ideal. That's a lot of work, so that's why we do all of these autonomous systems. So before we set up these tunnels, let's check out the compost heater and check out some data. It's about 2 weeks after we set this thing up and built the pile here, and the temperatures have gotten quite a bit colder overnight and for a daytime high. Jumping outside here real quick, that is showing about, it's dirty, but it's about 130 degrees. It's coming down, but sitting about 129, 130 degrees because it's freshly in the morning. Cold temperatures overnight. We had low 30s, like 31, 30 degrees or something. So having 67, 70 degrees on the outside of the pile just as the sun starts hitting it. It's very moist still, so we are not done with this yet. I am going to use a whole bunch of garden waste, yard waste, anything, leaves. I mean, we still have semi-green grass, nothing's growing. The cold temperatures are killing off most of the vegetative life, so we can use all of that to cap this. We'll throw a tarp on top. We're gonna go check on temperatures here. Battery died on the thermometer. I'm gonna get that replaced in a minute here. That was kind of disappointing, but anyway, we are blowing at least 90 degrees constantly, and that is first thing in the morning. Usually we're putting about 95 degrees out of here once the tank warms up. The tank itself was 66 degrees, and we went from 66 to 90, 91, but we may have been pushing a little bit warmer temperatures. I've just been running this down like this so we don't have any splashing, minimal noise and stuff. Don't lose much water. I mean, I got to get this covered a little bit so we're not evaporating too much off, because I like to have the thermal mass without having to refill it all the winter long. So those temperatures do fluctuate a bit with the cold temperatures and lack of insulation. This thing is sitting right around 110. Being able to achieve temperatures like that coming in the greenhouse, constantly heating up masses, heating up airspace. Even when we've got clouds and the sun is weak, we've got pulsing from all those systems along with our geothermal here. Little screen was popped up there. So I've shown in previous videos how I've gone about bending all of these hoops here. Now, it's quite simple to do it by hand and just to set up a jig with sticks out in the ground. But I've got all these bent and I don't have any more to bend, so I really don't have a DIY on showing how I actually bent them to get them into shape. And once we get them in shape outside, we can slowly manipulate them by stepping and pulling and bending them until they achieve a nice hoop. I mean, it's not perfect, but we created all of these by hand, so they all do serve their purpose. They were all free, recycled conduit, so we bent up maybe 20 or 25 of these, and they were all free. So in order to get these into the ground, which they are a good 1 and 1 1/4 inch diameter, so you got to shove them in the ground and get them nice and firm, because they're going to have a poly over top of them. So the number one thing I do and have done for the last couple days is really soak this greenhouse. We flooded them all out and allowed it to soak in, and did that multiple times, and I even came out here and did it again today before I actually push these in the ground. Now with our double layer greenhouse and the tunnels we're going to set up today, we could be anywhere from 3 to 4.5 zones warmer from zone 5A to 4B where we're at here. So we're right on the edge, and we see the polar vortexes, we see some darn cold winters. It has been pretty mild, so we're trying to get away with whatever we possibly can if the weather allows us. So I'm going to go ahead and get started setting these tunnels up. I want to state before I get going here that I put them every maybe 3 to 6 feet or so apart, because I want them to be nice and firm. I want it to be a nice solid structure. These are something we bring in every fall, winter, and take out every spring. So I've gotten pretty good at setting all of this up, and it's just one more piece to the puzzle. It's just something we always do in the fall time. My son got so warm down there, he had to turn the compost heater off. I'm gonna wash my hands up, and we're gonna go eat some bread real quick. Steaming hot, right out of the greenhouse. We're actually sweating out here. We had to turn the compost heater off because our stove was so darn warm. You can see they're handmade tunnels, all right. Now I like to use the little lower one. You see this one was like maybe a foot shorter than all of the rest. This one is basically the transfer piece. We have to wrap our plastic, continue down this bed with all of the tunnels here. So we're at least halfway there, getting all of these covered up. So we've created the ultimate sauna in here. It's super warm. My camera had shut off because it was too warm sitting in the sunlight. You can see I trimmed off our tomato, just leaving that little bottom of the plant. And this is where I cut it, and it's literally just hanging by the stick there. We've got lots of tomatoes on here, yeah. Clean off the tomatoes and compost the greens from these. Yeah, there's quite a few red tomatoes on there still. Compost pile still sitting about 130 in different spots. So that's good readings. We've got warm temperatures there. So now that we've had our snack and we've got all of our tunnels halfway situated, I did use some rocks after I pounded them in, just with whatever I got on hand. I'll use as a hammer, I guess. So we'll put some bricks or rocks around the base of those to try and hold them nice and tight, straight up, rigid, so we can get our poly over there, and then we should be in shape here. We've got our polys laid out front here. We've got our hose running through, so we've got both of the polys from last year are going to be up over these hoops. I had to take a break after getting that tunnel up. It is so darn warm in the greenhouse. With all the heating systems that we activated at once and then starting a fire on the stove and cooking, it's just overly warm. Coming down from the other side, we've got these tunnels, and I've left a gap on both ends down inside the tunnel here. So now we've got all of this situated. All of those are nice and secured. We've got bricks pinning most of these and then trying to pound them in place, keep them nice and sturdy. They're just trying to keep all of the poles from falling over while you're putting up the poly is pretty key. And then once you get the poly on, you can flip all the bed covers up, fold them up halfway, and you can access the top and pound on it, or you can brace it up with bricks. Now these row covers have worked for us for years now, so we've used them for at least 4 or 5 years on the channel, and it makes a huge difference covering up our greenhouse rows. By simply putting these row covers on, like I said, we got another zone or zone and a half in the greenhouse of protection. So that insulation factor paired with heating is going to make a huge difference for us and for anybody who does stuff like this. Now ventilation is key. You can see I rolled all this up, and this is how it's going to stay till it gets very cold out. I don't want to enclose these and seal them off nice and tight just yet. So once we do, we have to get good airflow inside these tunnels. So I'm going to be bringing heating and cooling, or just oxygenating and airflow of these tunnels in a completely separate video down the line here. Today was just basically getting these set up and showing how we can create such a great microclimate in our greenhouse. And a microclimate would be defined as an area in a climate that breaks the normal bounds because of some factor, like putting a tunnel on or having a southern facing corner that is going to stay warm and warm up a lot better than a northern facing corner. If you live in a warm enough area with enough sunlight, you could possibly get away with just doing this without any heating. Some geothermal possibly. If you have enough geothermal running, it can be achieved very easily. Now we've got to also set up all these lights. This is just a spare light bulb, but I have a string of about 40-50 feet of light that we use here. Knock my fig tree over. So we've got all those lights and we're going to use them, and we want these poles nice and sturdy, so I can run a small piece of wire and hang the lights from the actual tunnels themselves. It's something we did last year and it can be achieved. It's just a tedious task, just like assembling all this. It's always going to take a little work to achieve anything, so that doesn't deter me from setting all of this up. We've got a lot more work to do with all of this. I'm just glad we have growing what we have growing. We're nice and ready, prepared for the winter, ready to get on with a bunch of cool heating experiments down the line here. So back to the main topic of creating a microclimate or a greenhouse in your greenhouse. Man, you can add thermal mass, you can add rocks, our DIY bricks, our homemade clay bricks. There's just a ton of things. Thermal mass being close to or inside these tunnels would be perfect. What we've done in years past is had this large tank basically enveloped down on this end. It helps stave off the temperatures from our door and window. The only place that the air can flow through freely in cracks and stuff like that. So sealing up and insulating is very key in winter, but nothing is perfect. So having the thermal mass down here, having the lights inside the tunnel, having geothermal running, compost heat running in the greenhouse, all of those things allowed us to survive. So whether you've got the ability to perform all of those heating tasks or not, you can still create some darn good heat soaking, thermal soaking areas in your tunnels or in your greenhouse to allow for a small microclimate, even if it's not as extensive as something like this. Got all these little watercress. I've planted a little patch of them. You can see everything's kind of laid down just from the heavy watering, but man, everything looks so good in the greenhouse. We've got more area to plant. We've got to put our lights up. All of our apple and pear trees and stuff, they haven't even gone dormant yet in the greenhouse. All these perennials on this side of the bed. This little perennial bed and rooting bed area is probably the most interesting looking because there's so much diversity in there that's not your normal stuff that you grow in the greenhouse. Everything's just green, a little bit of red in there, some purples, just lots and lots of green. So if anybody had any questions today, definitely drop those to me in the comments below here. We'll be doing a lot of work in the greenhouse. We've got to get our timer set up on the water moving systems here, water heating systems. This pond has stayed about 66 to 70 degrees since we started running it through the bottom of our compost pile. So we've got good geothermal, or actually warming temperatures coming in here. This is definitely doesn't feel as cold as the water buckets I have outside. So this is very cool to have the pond. It's super bare because none of the plants are growing yet, but we've got watercress that has definitely grown a little bit since the couple days that I'd spent in here. So hopefully we can get a good huge patch of watercress there, and we can multiply it to the other sides, because this is going to be more of a filter, catching a bunch of debris and stuff. And then we'd like to grow some watercress, or possibly on floating rafts. There's a ton of stuff to do in the greenhouse here. I've got to get the other row cover on, possibly run our stove heater down there into our geothermal tube and put some more heat, possibly heat the floor. Just tons of ideas, cool experiments that you guys wanted to see, got my interest piqued. So here we are in winter of 24-25. So I'd really like to thank you guys for watching this video, checking out the build of our tunnels here, and asking all the questions that you guys ask. You guys get me thinking. Lots of stuff going on. My son's down there mowing down on some food, so I'm gonna go enjoy some food with him, and I will see you guys in the next video.